Hello everybody, you're all very welcome to episode 2 of Notions and Promotions. First of all, thank you to all who reached out after episode 1. I really did enjoy that conversation with Lucia, and it seems a lot of you did too, so thanks for that. Episode 2 is going to be great. It's a guy called Colin Maher. I've worked with him a little bit in the past. I really enjoyed this conversation, I have to say. It's always good when you have someone coming in at that level, at like the CEO level, for him to be able to give us insights to behind the mask, so to speak, and really get to know the person. The hour I spent with him flew by, and I hope you enjoy it as much as I did. So without further ado, here's my chat with Colin Maher. Colin, you're very welcome to Notions and Promotions. How are you?
I'm great. Yeah, very excited to be here.
So good. I'm delighted that you agreed to do it.
This is my first podcast.
Good. So first of many, hopefully.
Hopefully.
I have a load of questions I want to get through. A lot of them are focused, or most of them are focused on yourself, your own journey, your own career, and on developing others. But before we go into that, I'd love to hear a little bit about you first. Do you want to maybe tell us a bit about yourself?
Yeah, of course.
Not to do with work.
Yeah, delighted to. Absolutely. So, Colin Maher is my name, and I am probably about 35 odd years in financial services now, so getting scared when I counting up the years. But I think one of the things that I kind of amazes myself was when I left school, I had no interest in being in financial services at all. I actually trained as a TV cameraman.
No way.
So being in the studio now, all this is coming back to me about all the things that I learned. So I went to senior college Ballyfermot for 2 years. With a small group of people, and I trained, as I said, to be TV news cameraman. So the only jobs that were kind of available at the time, if RTE weren't hiring, was looking like to be sent out to some of the conflicts across the world.
Oh yeah.
So I decided that wasn't for me.
Okay.
And I joined the bank, which was supposed to be for 6 months. And I went into Irish Permanent for what I thought was going to be 6 months, and I had all kinds of plans to go back and kind of get my band off the ground and kind of get myself back into television, but ended up staying in the bank for years.
No
and that was my initial journey into financial services.
I didn't know that about that. I'm very interested on the television piece, to be honest. I didn't know about that about you at all. So did you do any work in TV, or was it just you did the Ballyfermot piece and then went straight into banking?
I did some work experience with the news crew. So you know the guys you'd see outside the court.
Yeah.
So I was the guy holding the mic up as you were waiting for the guy to come out of the court and chase him down the street with the camera. So
not super glamorous. Then.
Not super glamorous. No, it wasn't at all. But no, that was my starting point. But I was throughout my kind of school days, I was all very much interested in kind of art and media and kind of getting involved in television production. Yeah, and it's something that I sometimes wonder, should I have continued in it? But I think I've had a great and varied career in financial services, so it was a case of kind of the road not taken.
Yeah. And so the financial services piece, obviously that's super interesting for me. Talk me through, so you started at Irish Permanent, was it?
Yes. Yeah.
Walk me through your career from there then and the trajectory.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So as I mentioned, I went into Irish Permanent, and it was Irish Permanent Building Society at the time, back in the early 90s, and I went into the branch network. And I had some super days out in the branches of Dublin North, and it's where kind of a lot of the kind of customer kind of centricity that we'll hopefully get to talk about. That was kind of ingrained in me out in the branches of Dublin North. So I met a lot of kind of people I'd now classify as kind of great friends, people like Sean Lestrange and Michael Mernan, who I would have started with at the very, very start of the Irish Permanent, and have remained friends with them kind of ever since. But I went into, as I said, the branch network, and then I migrated into the broker centre. And I worked dealing with brokers on the mortgage side. Left there in 99, and I joined what was Irish Life Home Loans at the time. That migrated into IIB Home Loans and ultimately into KBC Home Loans. So I had various positions in underwriting teams. I was in charge of the buy-to-let team in KBC. I dealt with a lot of the bank's high net worth customers, the buy-to-let product, and of course really exciting times during the boom. And some really good days and some kind of great experiences. But of course, unfortunately, that turned into the crash. And that was a kind of a real kind of lesson in leadership, because, the crash itself, people went from kind of, a new business kind of front, a new business framework, into all of a sudden, things were starting to fall apart. And, repayments people were struggling with repayments. And, talking to customers who kind of were just shocked by this. And KBC at the time wasn't set up for it. No one could have predicted what would have happened, and it was a kind of a huge kind of learning curve for kind of a person in an early stage of management like I was. But I went in then to the kind of collections teams in KBC. I would have worked up as part of the KBC strategy for collections, helped kind of integrate the target operating model, the strategies for recovery, designing policies and procedures. And then in 2014, I had the opportunity to work in the private equity world.
Brilliant. And
helped private equity company build a business in Dublin. And that business was started in 2014. It was just me at the start, with probably one other person. And we took that to kind of over 400 people. We brought the assets from $1 billion up to nearly kind of over $9 billion. And that in itself was another kind of learning curve, because you're coming from a bank which was kind of suit and tie.
Yeah.
Very proceduralized, very much rules based, which of course it had to be, into kind of a private equity model which kind of moved very fast, and decisions were made very quickly, and very entrepreneurial kind of spirit, which was a different culture change. And
I want to come back to the culture piece, because that's something I want to flesh out a little bit, but on leadership, you mentioned it a couple of times already, and you've managed massive teams, said over 400 people at one stage. Can you tell me about, if you can recall, not that it's that far ago, your first leadership experience, or the first time you thought to yourself, I'm leading people here, I'm a leader, I'm seen as a leader?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, look, it's something it's quite common across my particular journey. I know it's probably similar to other leaders, but it's when people turn around and they're looking to you for direction, and they're saying, okay, something has gone wrong. Okay, well, what do we do now? And they're looking to you for the answers. And I remember at the time, I was thinking to myself, well, I don't have the answer. I don't know what to do here, right? But as a leader, then you're thinking about, well, actually, okay, well, it's about being calm. It's about being measured in your response, and actually saying, well, actually, I don't have the answer, but I know how we can get it, and how we as a team can kind of come together and actually work the solution out. And that to me was an experience. I can remember that back in KBC when we were dealing with a particular situation, and kind of the guys, I distinctly remember someone saying to me, what are we going to do? And actually you kind of freeze for a moment, and you kind of say, well, actually, I don't know. I don't know what to do. And then it was a realization on me that as a leader, you don't necessarily have to be a subject matter expert, but you have to know kind of how to engineer the solution, and how to kind of find the path through it. There's a phrase I always thought very early in my kind of leadership career. It sounds a bit weird, and so bear with me on it, right? But as a leader, you're being watched, and people are watching you. And when I first heard it, it was, again, a very good leader, Kevin Blake, who said that to me, who's been a mentor to me. But he said, you're being watched. And as I said, it does sound kind of strange, but when you think about it, your team are watching you. How are you going to react? Your clients are watching you. How are you going to kind of deal with this? How are you going to solve my problem? Regulators are watching you. Other stakeholders in the business, such as the exec team, are watching how are you going to react. And you have choices. And again, I remember that situation. Well, I can kind of wring out my hands and say, I don't know what to do. Right? You can kind of cry and say, oh my God, what do I do? But that to me was a kind of, as I say, it was a realization that you don't have to know what to do, but you're being watched. People are actually going to say, well, how is this guy? How's Maher going to deal with this? And how is he going to lead us through this? And it's something that is kind of it's stuck with me throughout my career.
Very good. As leaders, we're always constantly developing and trying to get better, or most of us are at least. If you were to go back and look at your first role as a people manager or as a leader versus the most recent role, how much of a change have you seen in yourself, and where did that change come from, Colin? Was that a professional development piece you undertook yourself? Is it learning from others? Talk me through your own leadership journey.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. So a lot of it has come from observation and coaching and mentoring, and kind of surrounding yourself with really good people who kind of will be there for you.
Yeah.
And that is what I realized over the years was that, and it comes back to the point about not having to know all the answers. Right? I think a lot of leaders at times are afraid to put their hand up and say, I don't know. And what certainly helped me in my career was having a network of peers, of coaches, of people I describe as mentors, and they can be friends as well, who you just pick up the phone to and say, listen, what do I do here? Have you been through this before? And 9 times out of 10 they have, and they can give you kind of a steer. They can give you kind of, and at times you need a place to vent as well, to say, oh my God, this has gone wrong. I can't believe it's happened, but you can do it in a safe space. and that to me was a real change, because I was able to kind of engage, with a network of kind of people who've been there and done that and experienced stuff, and they could coach and guide me and kind of, shape some of my reactions, and I mean, learned at a very early age, walk away from the keyboard, and again, that's stuff that was helped. That was, coaches kind of helped me with that, because initially you want to respond and you want to kind of deal with something, but walk away, think about stuff. Other stuff I've learned, Keith, when thinking back, is that the amount of Sunday nights sleep that I lost as a leader in my early stages of my management career, because I was panicking and worrying over what was going to happen that Monday. I've got this meeting on Monday morning, and this message has to be delivered, or this is going to come up, right? Or we've got this coming up this week. And kind of I can recall kind of lying awake on a Sunday night. My kids were very small at the time, and kind of not probably being there for them either. But, it doesn't matter. Like the jobs we do, right? I mean, a lot of it, I can't remember kind of half of the reason that I was kind of lying awake in bed worrying about stuff, because, it doesn't matter, and that took me a while to realise, that, it's going to be okay. And going back, if I go back to my younger self and the career and say, listen, this is going to be okay. You will find a path through this. You will have a solution. You know enough people who can help guide and coach you. You have a great team around you. So there's no point in pacing the house, at 2:00 in the morning worrying about something. And trying to kind of ingrain that in me, and then trying to make sure that I had kind of my own personal infrastructure. And I mean by that, sounds very kind of grand, but being able to kind of go to the gym in the morning, or being able to kind of go for a run and not ruminate over these things.
It's very interesting that you say that, because when I think back at my time in banking, and I would have been very much Sunday night pacing the floors, worrying about things, or waking up at like 3 a.m. to make a note about a meeting I had the next day. And when I moved into recruitment, I remember Paul, who I work with, one of the first weeks saying to me, what we're doing is not life or death stuff. It's, you can leave it at the desk at 5:30 and come back. And obviously that's not applicable for every role, but in general, it really resonated with me, the fact that you can actually do quite well in a career and not be thinking about your job 24/7. Tell me on the leadership piece, and I'll move on to other topics in a second, but I'm particularly interested in these facets of leadership. Do you think, in your own view, so again, I'm looking at your own career trajectory, starting off in retail banking, becoming a CEO of a firm, is that ability in everybody? Is it learned, or are you born with that? I guess it's not an attribute of leadership. Or I guess the question I'm trying to ask in a roundabout way is, do you think everybody can get there? And if not, what is it that makes or gives someone the ability to get to like the top of their game?
It's a very good question. If I think about my own journey, and I go back to my time in KBC, if you had told me I would have been a CEO of a large organisation back then, I would have found that hard to believe. Because it wasn't on my career path, and no one was coaching me towards that, and it wasn't something that, I mean, obviously I would have loved to have been one, but it just wasn't kind of on my radar. And I think what happened with me was I evolved into the role, and I was able to kind of prove myself in a very kind of short time, and in a kind of smaller company, that I was able to step in and kind of do the role. So the question is, I think there's leaders who kind of naturally are trained to be a CEO, or kind of who are on progression plans and on succession plans, and kind of are being coached and mentored into a CEO role, which is fantastic, right? But I think being a CEO, there's a textbook way of doing it, which is kind of following the IOD way of kind of being a company director. Yeah. That's all fine, but it's a people business. You're managing your teams, you're managing your stakeholders, you're managing kind of the regulators, your clients, your customers, and a CEO has to be all over that. Yeah. So my point being is that I think you can be a really good CEO in one element of those. You can be the best people CEO in the world, right? But you might be kind of, your regulatory relationship might be in the pan, or kind of your ability to manage kind of other stakeholders such as clients and customers, might be kind of wanting. And I think that's the huge difference. And it's probably something, if I think back, when I first kind of started being a CEO, I focused on the people side, and I focused on being that leader who was on the floor and was one of the gang, and was kind of, we'd all go out on a Friday night to celebrate success and all that. And, looking back, it was great at the time, but, that was only a very small element of the job. And actually, it wasn't kind of the appropriate side of the job for me. And I had to learn that lesson, that you can be kind of a people leader, but you also need to kind of spin the other plates as well.
Yeah.
And that's what I think is kind of the real, like, to your point about being born into it. I think a person who can do that and has the natural ability to kind of dial up those various elements as the situation arises, I think makes a really good CEO.
The follow-up question I would have, and I was thinking about this as you were talking, when you talk about this, the CEO being a people person, and you need to be all over your, the regulators, your clients, your employees, when does the time come in for Colin Maher to do family stuff, or the gym you mentioned earlier? Is there sacrifices that need to be made both from a business and a personal perspective, or how would you balance it? How do you balance it?
Yeah, no, that is tough. And then again, my own children who will be watching this, because they're very excited about their dad doing a podcast. I mean, they have been exceptionally patient with me. And again, it goes back to the point about pacing the floor at 2 o'clock in the morning, right? I can recall holidays in France when the kids were small, and Dad had to stop the car on the motorway because he had to take a call. Or Dad had to miss a match on a Saturday because he had to prepare something, right? And again, it comes back to, what we were saying about, it doesn't matter. You know, like, I can't remember why I had to miss a kid's match, or why I had to stop and take a call in the halfway down a motorway in France. And I regret that. I regret not having kind of, more of a work-life balance. I got better at it. I hope I did, and hope my family will kind of attest to that. I had to take some steps, and I had to kind of ensure that I was kind of doing what was right for me, what was right for my family. The business is designed to survive without you. Yeah. And that's what you have to realize, right? But your family isn't, and that's a lesson I think a lot of CEOs kind of struggle with. I know some really good friends of mine in really senior positions, and they wrestle with that too. But I think to get it right, you have to kind of learn from your mistakes. You have to go through that, and everyone's experience is unique to them. But I used to coach kind of my kind of son and daughter's football team, and as a rule, I would leave the office at 4 o'clock so that I could be home to bring them training. And the pressure to get out at 4 o'clock because all your meetings were backed up to that point. But that was my non-negotiable. I said, right, I have to be there to be with my kids, and then I'd log back on later. But a lot of it, there's a lot of stuff I sacrificed that, hindsight, was it worth it? Yeah, great LinkedIn profile and kind of had a nice title. But now I think for me, very much, and at my stage in life, it is very much about kind of getting that balance right and carving out the time. And you see this a lot in kind of when leaders speak, and I was listening to Lucia speaking to you last week, and about it's about the non-negotiables, about what's important for you. About you get up in the morning, you make sure you carve out your gym time, or you go for a walk, or you go for a run, or you block out your diary over lunchtime so you can kind of get something to eat and relax. And I think you're seeing that an awful lot more, I think, with CEOs, which I think, and leaders in general, which I think is the right thing to do. Brilliant.
You mentioned there about being in a people business. I'm also in a people business, being a recruiter. So I want to talk a little bit about hiring. In general, talk me through what your hiring process would look like. What are you looking for in terms? I know that's very role specific, right? But in general, talk me through how you hire.
Well, apart from ringing you, well, from a philosophy perspective, if my philosophy has always been, hire people who are better at the job than you are, right? And people you can work with and have a bit of fun with, and kind of who will be part of your team. So the long kind of answer to that is having a network of people around you that that I'd love to have that person on my team one day, right? And you can see a future that there's a person in a particular organization, or there's a person in my network that if something comes up, I would love to be able to pick up the phone and say, come in for a chat. Secondly, I think it's partnering, and joking aside, it's partnering with people who actually understand kind of your business and understand kind of you as a hiring manager. And kind of from that recruitment kind of perspective, it's using the right recruiters who actually kind of who get you.
Yeah.
You know, I think that's really important. You know, who kind of get you, get your culture. You know, and aren't just looking for a commission, who are looking actually for longer term relationships. And kind of hiring for culture, you know, is key, because, you know, you spend years building a culture, and the one wrong hire can come in and kind of, you know, unsettle that. And that to me is kind of really important. But I've always focused on kind of, you know, well, who is out there? Who's the person that, you know, we can convince to come and join our gang, you know, and then who's a recruiter that we can work with to kind of help unlock that. And obviously then, if you've kind of supplementing that with, you know, kind of your own talent acquisition team who are kind of working the network for you as well.
Yeah.
But that's really been my philosophy. Like the last team I had, kind of I missed the guys every day, because I had the privilege of being able to hand select them, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And I had an open role for chief commercial officer. I knew exactly who I wanted. An open role for kind of a CRO. I knew who I wanted.
Yeah.
And that then, you know, you're creating that that kind of powerful team, because you're bringing people together for a purpose. Now, not everyone has. I was very fortunate when I was able to do that.
Yeah.
You know, and that's why bringing in someone like yourself to actually say, you know, who gets the culture, and say, well, that person is really qualified, but they're not going to fit Colin's culture. You know, and I'm willing to waive a commission until I find the person. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I totally get it.
Yeah.
It's funny because when I look, and I only got this view from becoming a recruiter myself previously at the bank. I would have been the hiring manager, hiring people into my team, and it's always a fine line, or there's a fine balance between hiring the right person who's going to be the right cultural fit, but also at the right time. And I remember, again, in my own career, managing operations teams where you might have 4 people in a team processing widgets, and one of them resigns, and then the other 3 are picking up that workload in the interim while you're looking for the replacement. And whilst the ideal is excellent culture, blah 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 blah, sometimes the timing piece, you need to just get a bum on the seat. How do you balance that in terms of bringing all of those multiples together to hire the ideal candidate?
Succession is a huge part of that. You know, I'll share a sad story, and again, apologies if this is kind of off message, but I had a situation as a leader when an expert that was very passionate about the business, you know, passionate about the team, and unfortunately, you know, died suddenly. And you know, you kind of, and wonderful chap, and again, you know, miss the guy every day, because he was just so passionate about what our business was. But moving into the practical side, and moving into the recruitment side, it was okay, right? Who needs to replace? Who needs to step in here? Who is coming up kind of behind the person? And you know, you find yourself in that situation, which is actually saying, okay, well, you know, okay, I'm sorry, and make up names, but okay, John, you know, I know you're very upset, but you are now not going to need to step into the shoe here, because there is a role that needs doing. There's commitments that need to be made by the client, and making sure that John, again, false name, was ready to do that.
Yeah.
And you know, again, as a leader, you're trying to manage the emotion and the terrible situation, and terribly sad it was, but obviously protecting the business and making sure that the business could continue. So that was just one. Again, it's a kind of, you know, particularly a kind of out there example, but it's assuming that, you know, people are going to leave, and that you've got people who are coming through who are ready to step in, and it's identifying that career path for nearly everyone in your team, that you can say, okay, if that person does leave, right, that there's 3 people who could step up, and this is the stages in their development which they're at, you know, because we were very fortunate. It was a terrible, sad time for the business. We were in the middle of an extremely important project. That person was key to it, but we were fortunate in that we had somebody who was able to kind of move into the role, was ready to take over, and is still doing the role today, despite a terrible, sad situation. And it was a credit to the individual who stepped in, but that was thanks to the investment that was made to make sure that that person was ready to step in.
And we've both actually mentioned a couple of times the word culture, and I did say at the beginning that we'd come back to it. When I talk to clients from a recruitment perspective, the culture fit piece is super important. But I think sometimes the word culture can be overused, or maybe not clearly defined. From your perspective, Colin, what is an effective working culture? What's a good working culture look like?
Yeah, so I'm sure I'm sure you've heard, kind of your listeners would have heard of the iceberg kind of theory about
Yeah.
culture. When you have, the top of the iceberg that sticks out, which is, the things you can see. And that's the posters you put on the wall. It's your procedure documents. It's the statements you make about, this is a great place to work. But underneath the iceberg, you've got all the, the way people actually feel, the way people actually do things around here, what actually happens. So I think for me, I mean, like I have worked in places where, the posters are on the wall about, what we do as a team and kind of, what our culture is. And, in the induction manual kind of says, here's our culture. Right? But for me, it is actually what goes on underneath that. And it's how you are kind of, you as a CEO, you as a leader, actually understand what it is that people are doing. So what I kind of wrestled with over the years is, tone from the top. And I would talk at town halls or I talk at meetings about the importance of culture for me. And what I mean by that is the importance of kind of a culture of compliance, a culture of customer centricity, a culture of teamwork, a culture of kind of making sure that, we put ourselves in the shoes of the client. And what I would find on occasion was when you go down a couple of layers, that message hasn't got through. And that is when, you know that in areas that you may not have an effective culture because your message, your tone hasn't filtered down all the way. And that to me is kind of, a good leader, a good CEO will continue to challenge all the lines of communication, all the way down to the kind of entry level to ensure that that message is understood, make sure that people kind of understand and have been told, what kind of customer centricity looks like, what a culture of compliance looks like, and that they're working to it. They haven't read it on a sign on the wall. It's actually something that is part of their day-to-day job. And I'm going to use the word that they get it, and that they turn up every day and kind of aspire to adhere to that. But when you have kind of layers of management or that aren't kind of promoting that tone, that's when the culture for me can break down. And as a CEO, you need to be kind of not just on top of that, but you need to be all over. You need to be kind of ensuring that, every layer in your organization kind of gets it. So what I've again experienced in the past is we say we offer the customers a good service, but are we actually kind of doing that? And again, as a CEO, are you listening to calls? Are you opening post? Are you kind of walking the floor and kind of hearing what's going on? Or are you locking yourself in an office and getting, a kind of a sheet of data every day that tells you we made 100 calls or we collected X amount of cash or we did whatever, right? Which is great, but, what's actually happening underneath that? What are the calls like? What are we saying to our customers? I remember kind of in the Irish Permanent in Raheny, and every evening the branch manager, a guy called Dick Cooper, used to come down and he would count all the checks, and he did that to understand what was going on in his branch. And I was 19 years of age looking, why are you coming down to do that? But he did it because he would see, oh, hi Mary, I see you were in yesterday and you lodged 10,000, or kind of, but he would understand what his customers were doing, and he would walk the branch as well to kind of hear the interaction between, whereas others were just in their room. And I learned that at a very early age in Irish Permanent, that you need to understand what's going on in your business. You go and sit and have lunch with people in the canteen. How are they feeling about things? And all of that will kind of again as a leader will ensure that your message about culture, whether it's working or not.
In terms of what you've just called out, how are you assessing someone in an interview to be a good cultural fit when there's technical skills you need to assess as part of that process and other bits and pieces? Is there a technique that you use or a strategy that you use to make sure when we come back and saying cultural fit is important, how are you sound checking everything that you've just said against a potential candidate coming into a business to work for you?
It comes back to kind of, it's the feeling you get about someone who's sitting in front of you, who is, you can ask the individual questions about the kind of the role that they're being hired for from subject matter expertise, okay, but taking them kind of down a different avenue and asking them, well, tell me about a situation where you had difficulty with a teammate and how did you resolve it, right? Or what would you do if, tell me about your kind of interaction with the central bank, for example. Tell me about your interaction with the Department of Finance. Oh, I don't really deal with that, or kind of I've never bothered with them, or that's not for me, right? Well, tell me what you would do, if you were, and you're kind of trying to get to the person's character, and you've no doubt that they're perfectly technically competent to do the job. But it's just little kind of trigger signs that would come across when you're asking kind of the candidate to, if you were in my situation, what would your view of kind of customers be, or what would your view of dealing with the regulator be, and kind of again you'll pick up kind of red flags very quickly. I think that if that person isn't a good kind of cultural fit. I have been at interviews when I've said, if I hired this person, it's going to take my business to a new dimension in terms of commercial objectives, or in terms of kind of the bottom line, right? But you just had a feeling that, okay, well, I don't like the direction of that conversation, or I don't like that message, and I'm not sure this person is going to fit with the team that we already have, and could potentially be a disruptor. And again, as a leader, it's about having kind of the courage to actually say, well, do you know what, there's a bigger picture here, rather than chasing pure commercial gains. And sometimes it's a difficult message to absorb and to accept, because you are judged on your bottom line. But the bottom line will take care of itself if you have the right culture and if you have the right people.
The conversation with Lucy, if you have listened to it, go back and listen to it. It's amazing. She's an amazing
Absolutely.
woman.
No, I have. It's very good. Yeah.
Very, very, very insightful stuff that she was sharing with us. But we talked a little bit about diversity and inclusion, and that DEI phrase that I think has taken a bashing, in my view, over the past maybe year or so. From an inclusion perspective specifically, Colin, is there something that you think needs to be done more of, less of, better in Ireland in terms of bringing people along on the journey with you as a leader?
Oh yeah, without a doubt. Again, I'll share an example where the time of the Dublin riots, the Christmas party of the previous organisation I was with was the night after that. And a lot of people who were from kind of different backgrounds didn't attend, and reason given was that I'm afraid in Dublin at the moment. And for me that was really sad, because you have wonderful people from diverse backgrounds in our kind of organisation that were afraid to leave the house and come and celebrate with their colleagues. And that to me, again, standing as CEO and you're looking around and a quarter of the floor is empty, at the party, because people are afraid in the city that I grew up in, and I was thinking to myself, well, what can I do here? And what I can do as a CEO is making sure that my business at the time, or our business at the time, was embracing kind of D&I, embracing kind of, and learning. What I used to love was, Pride Month was fantastic in kind of the previous organisation, and kind of like we weren't in school in the 80s, that wasn't on the curriculum, right?
Or the 90s.
And even learning about kind of Indian culture and African culture, again, never thought that, right? Even throughout my career kind of in financial services. So to spend a couple of £100 to kind of bring these events to life, and seeing how much it meant to the team to be part of it. And even as a CEO, you're getting up and you're doing your dad dance at Africa Day, and there was we brought music into our business at the time from kind of African culture. We brought Indian dancing in, and it meant so much to people who were thinking about kind of their own cultures. So that to me, I know it's event based, but it's so simple and it's so important for people, and it's so important for a leader to be actually saying, okay, the bad stuff that's happening in Dublin, let's just park that to one side, acknowledge it's awful, but let's look at what we're doing here as part of our culture, as part of our inclusive culture and our diverse culture. And the point I was making about being in school in the 80s was that, again, I wasn't taught that. So for a 53-year-old man to learn this kind of stuff, I think it makes me a better father, makes me a better kind of person.
Yeah.
And I learned that from my team, which that's priceless, Keith, it really is. And so as a leader, I think if you're embracing that, those simple things, it doesn't cost much, if you're embracing that, it's fantastic.
The DEI piece is interesting for me for a number of reasons. I would be very passionate about bringing people along on a journey and everyone on the same journey, and it being equitable. And one piece, I was actually reading a statistic last week, and I don't want to lower the tone somewhat, but when you look at one of the biggest killers of teenage boys, it's suicide. And I know men's mental health, in particular over the past, I would say, couple years, there's been a spotlight shone on that, and rightly so. From a business perspective, Colin, do you think we're doing enough in that space? What are your thoughts on that more generally?
Look, I think it's a hugely important topic. Firstly, from a leadership perspective, like leaders are expected to be hugely resilient, and you're expected, again, go back to what I said about being watched. You're expected to absorb everything which is thrown at you, and deal with it.
Yeah.
And there's only so much you can take. There's only so much you can process. And what I find about kind of leadership is that it's exceptionally lonely. And you're dealing with huge kind of issues, kind of crisis at times, exceptionally stressful situations, which if you don't have an avenue to kind of, address those in a constructive way, I think it can lead to huge problems. So I think it can lead to kind of emotional difficulties. I think, you've referenced kind of suicide. I mean, it can lead to kind of issues with alcohol and kind of other kind of bad things. So are we doing enough? I don't think we're talking about it enough from a leadership perspective. I don't think we're talking about kind of, what do leaders do when they want to talk. Now, one of the avenues I mentioned, I had to have my non-negotiables, which was kind of the gym time or going for a run. But I also think that it's exceptionally important to have a network of peers that you can talk to. I think what a lot of leaders are afraid of doing, in my experience, is admitting weakness, because there might be someone coming up behind them who is going to use it as a kind of leverage to kind of attempt to get their role. So what as I mentioned, I have a great network of people I trust, people I can pick up the phone to and say, I'm struggling with this, or I need to vent for half an hour. Can I come and talk to you? Can I come and can we go for a walk? Can we go for a run? And being able to have that network who you trust, I think it's hugely important. Again, are we doing enough then as a leader? One of the things I was very passionate about was ensuring kind of, as part of our D&I program, was that, as a leader, I would share my own experiences. I share the fact that, I had to go for runs and I had to kind of go to the gym to kind of, get the bad things out of my head. And, I was fortunate in that some of the kind of the male staff from kind of the old team would come and say, listen, thank you for saying that. That resonated with me. And the fact that you said it as a leader makes me more kind of confident to be able to deal with kind of issues I might be dealing with. And then again, it's making sure that you've got the right programs in place, making sure you've got the expert advice for people, making sure that you're recognizing that, look, it's a job, it's going to be okay, right? And that you've got, you have, even down to the people in your organization that you're saying, look, you don't know what the person is bringing into work. You don't know what they've left behind at home to come into the office. And then they deal with one difficult client call, or they deal with one difficult kind of issue. And, that on top of what they're managing at home could be enough to put them over the edge. And again, it's having your teammates that are there with you to be able to kind of respond to say, are you okay? Empowering them to say, look, do you want to go out for coffee? It's the simple things. And I always try to promote that as a leader. I think it's hugely important.
Let's move on. Let's look forward. So, again, topics like AI, there's definitely a lot happening in the recruitment sector in this space. In financial services, I'm not expecting you to have all of the answers here, but your own thoughts on what's coming down the track from a business perspective with technology, enhancements, developments, etc. What you see being fundamentally different in, say, 10, 15, 20 years' time?
You're asking me all the hard questions there. Yeah. You said this is going to be a chat.
and to be fair, I've given him some of the questions in advance, but some I'm just asking as they come into my head.
No,
so I am catching them on the fly.
No, it's fair. Look, in terms of AI, is probably the most exciting but challenging thing. I think that is facing the industry. Look, when AI will change, it will change everything, but it will also change nothing. I think it will change how customers engage. It will change how kind of information is shared, in terms of kind of the speed of information, in terms of the speed of processing, kind of for a customer to engage with a financial services institution. And I think it is fundamentally changing that at the moment. Like even my kids are using words to me like, Dad, will you rev me this, or will you rev me that? Like the Bank of Dad is well.
Yeah.
But I think that is those kind of norms are just going to continue and go to grow as people just use their phone and use their iPad to kind of do their financial services. Now, when I say it will change nothing, right? You know, financial services is probably the most important kind of element of people's lives. It's their mortgages, it's their savings, it's how they transact, right? So people still need to speak to somebody, and people need to get that level of service. And the challenge for the industry is going to be is that, like, can a machine provide the same level of service to somebody regarding a serious question about their mortgage, or kind of when they're in distress and they need kind of help from their financial institution. So I think that's going to be the balance, which is kind of making sure that financial institutions have tech so that customers can engage, have tech so that it's efficient, so that instead of having 4 people to send out a customer letter, that, you know, AI kind of can do it within a couple of seconds, right? But you have a kind of an expert at the end of the line who is there to be able to kind of support kind of the customer when they need them. And I think, like, it's no secret, I think everyone's kind of wrestling with that at the moment about, you know, do we have people in branches who do it? Do we have, you know, people in call centres? And that's going to be the trade-off between, you know, do we have an expensive call centre, or, you know, do we have a balance between kind of, you know, for best-in-class tech, but the right level of experts who are available to someone. I read something really interesting that, you know, the challenger banks that are kind of doing the best in terms of public perception are the ones that have really good tech and someone you can speak to. Whereas the ones that are potentially struggling are the ones that have really good tech and, you know, maybe if somebody can speak to. You know? And that to me, I think is going to be really interesting, you know, particularly in our industry.
Brilliant. So that's the future with AI. What about the future for Colin Maher? Talk us through where's your head at? What's next for you?
Well, I've had a lovely few months off and kind of been able to spend time kind of at home. Kind of took some time to myself. I've spent time kind of again with I have 3 wonderful children at home, and kind of been able to kind of not reconnect with them because I haven't been away, but, you know, been able to kind of be there an awful lot more has been brilliant. So what I have enjoyed over the last kind of 10 years was the pace of the role I was in, the experience and the thrill of being in a role. But I also kind of underestimated how tired I would be at the end of it. So having that break to be able to kind of recharge was actually very important. I think, look, what really excites me now is kind of the opportunities that AI will bring, the opportunities for good customer service. You know, stuff that I've learned from working in fast-paced kind of European business, what is done well in other countries across Europe that Ireland could do, and being able to work kind of with a team that, you know, has a kind of an entrepreneurial spirit. You know, that to me is kind of super exciting.
Well, the best of luck. Delighted that you came in to spend some time with me today. I really appreciate it. I can't let you go before asking you some quick fire questions. Now, full disclosure for listeners, Colin got, I'd say, probably 70% of the questions in advance so he could prepare some of his answers. But for the quick fire, he hasn't seen any of these. This is all going to be off the cuff to get the latest and the greatest from Colin. So my first question is, what is your favourite restaurant in Dublin?
Eto.
Eto, very nice. Still or sparkling water?
Sparkling.
Cats
after some excitement.
So exciting. Cats or dogs?
Dogs.
Work from home or work in the office?
Both. That's you can't do a quick fire on that now. It's two both. They both have their merits.
What's one thing you will predict is going to happen from a hiring perspective in the future?
Is that a quick fire question, or is that
what just pops into your head?
I don't like the answer, but more automation. Okay. And the reason I don't like the answer is I think it's the computer says no. I think the wrong candidates, you know, I think automation of the process may kind of deter or not let some right candidates through a process who might be a right fit for your business. But again, automation is saying no. So, saying personal view now, but
that's all we're looking for. What's been your favourite holiday that you've ever taken?
Now I have to be very careful now because my children will kind of. So I'm going to say a week cycling in the French Alps with a bunch of, you know, diverse group of kind of men in their 40s from various backgrounds, cycling bikes in the French Alps, pretending we're in the Tour de France. That was one of the best.
Very good. And my last question, north side or south side?
I'm gonna go south side because I'm from the south side here,
Are you?
and I'll be killed.
I thought you were from the north side. Where are you from?
I'm from Temple Oak originally.
Okay, so proper south side then. Fine. We'll leave it there.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Colin, thanks
That
for
was
your
a pleasure.
time.
Thank you very much.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Now, there you go. That was my chat with Colin Maher. Really insightful, lots of bits and pieces to take away from there from my own perspective, from his thoughts on leadership to the importance of clients and his client base, and even things that I really probed him on around mental health and diversity, stuff that I think gives us a really good insight into Colin as a person. As I said, I really, really enjoyed it, and I have lots of time for Colin, so thanks, Colin, for coming on the podcast. Coming up next, I have a couple of really, really exciting guests. I don't want to give too much away now, but I think the next couple of episodes are going to be just as exciting as the previous two. So until then, see you later.